Let's bring you some reaction to the NPA head's Shamila Batohi's talk this evening with Lawson Naidoo, who's the Council for the Advancement of South African Constitution, who's with CASAC and also in attendance at the Rule of Law lecture by the NDPP. A very good evening to you, Lawson. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, a short while ago, we listened to Batohi speaking about the NPA's understanding that there's a lot of frustrations, but around the NPA's slow pace in dealing with these prosecuting corrupt leaders and private individuals who enabled corruption. But of course, talking about the culture of accountability as well, what did you make of that explanation when it comes to the immense cries from the public for something to be done?
Good evening, thank you. Well, look, I think Advocate Batohi used the opportunity of this lecture this evening to explain the functioning of the National Prosecuting Authority, what it does, how it does its work, what its challenges are, and what its constraints are. And she highlighted, for example, that state capture and corruption cases comprise just 0.01% of their caseload, that the vast majority of cases that are dealt with by the NPA relate to ordinary crime, to crime that we see in an increasingly violent society, and sought to put issues around state capture in their context. She located her remarks around the principle and the importance of strengthening and adhering to the rule of law in all facets of our society, that this is something that is foundational to our constitutional principles and values, and that it needs to be respected by all in society. She's also emphasized the fact that the challenge of tackling state capture is not one that sits with the NPA alone, but is one that sits with government at large and with South Africa in general. And she urged all of us to work together to assist the NPA in doing so. And in that regard, I think one of the key points that she made in her lecture this evening was the establishment of a new digital evidence unit that is being done by the NPA in partnership with the private sector to provide the NPA with the kind of forensic capability that they do not currently have and which is necessary in order to investigate and prosecute highly complex state capture and corruption cases.
How important then do you think, with this new addition, the new digital evidence unit, how important would it be to ensure that they are now, there's a lot of emphasis on coordinated efforts to prosecute by the police, the Hawks, the SIU, as well as the NPA, to those involved in the acts of impunity? Because, you know, that's just one device, but I would imagine that teamwork will essentially make the dream work, as cliche as that sounds.
Well, indeed, and this was another aspect of Advocate Batohi's speech this evening, where she explained, the criminal justice system as a whole, that to a large extent the NPA find themselves at the very end of that value chain as the last part of that process. It starts with somebody going to a police station and laying a criminal complaint, then an investigation, usually by the South African Police Service, or in some cases by the Hawks, and then bringing a docket to the NPA to decide whether the case is strong enough to prosecute or not. And that's in the case of ordinary, criminal prosecutions. Now, in regards to state capture and corruption, she spoke about the establishment of the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption, the IDAC, which was put in place just a few months ago. And this digital evidence unit will be working closely with investigators and prosecutors in the IDAC to ensure that the level of investigations, particularly in cases where it relies on huge volumes and masses of evidence that sit and reside on telephones and other electronic devices, need to be collated, mined, and presented in a form of evidence that can secure prosecution. So she spoke about it as being a game changer. It's obviously still early days, and we'll yet to see the fruits of this labor in successful prosecutions. But what she sought to emphasize, what this would greatly assist the NPA, that these were the kinds of very scarce skills that the NPA itself could not bring in internally because they would not be able to afford those skills. So the offer of assistance from the private sector with all of the due safeguards in place to ensure that the independence and the integrity of the NPA in its prosecutorial function is not compromised in any way.
We've also heard, Lawson, a lot around fingers being pointed on around the notion that South Africa's rule of law is essentially on life support. I mean, how much was spoken to that topic? More so, I mean, I do recall just a few months ago, Justice Edwin Cameron warning against those who would undermine the Constitution and the rule of law because they want to see the barriers to looting disabled.
Indeed, and those were both issues to which Advocate Batohi focused some of her remarks this evening. She described the challenge of the rule of law as a crisis in South Africa at this point in time, something that we need to redouble our efforts to ensure remains a valued principle that underpins our constitutional democracy. She also reflected on the words of Justice Cameron from what you've just mentioned, where he spoke about those who are intent of undermining the rule of law for their own purposes. And Advocate Batohi went a little bit further in talking about an orchestrated campaign to undermine the credibility and the integrity of the NPA by those who may find themselves in the crosshairs of the NPA or of the IDAC in pursuit of these state capture cases. She highlighted the fact that many of these people are well resourced and will use every legal trick in the book to try and evade accountability for their actions, and that the NPA needs to stand up to that kind of onslaught against it. And it requires society to be with the NPA in that, because of course it is in all our interests that we have a strong NPA, one that is not undermined by actors that seek to subvert its functions, and who may therefore seek to escape accountability. And this is something that we've seen previously, which again Advocate Batohi highlighted in the 2000s, which led to the demise of the then Directorate of Special Operations, the Scorpions. And this is something that we can ill afford to happen in South Africa now, when the NPA is building up its arsenal in order to tackle state capture and corruption.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in and giving us a sense of what came out of that talk. Wrapping up that conversation, Lawson Naidoo, who is with the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, CASAC, weighing in on the rule of law lecture by the NDPP.